Glacier National Park was a place of ancient mountains and secrets whispered on the wind. But Dr. Mira Patel never believed she'd stumble across a miracle. It was just past midnight in late May, the kind of crisp, moon-splashed night that made everything seem possible and unreal at the same time. She was 33, small but wiry, her hair tied back beneath her battered ranger cap, moving carefully along a ridge above the meadows. Her heart beat steady in her chest, her hands expert with her field journal and long-lens camera, every sense sharpened by the hush of darkness. She was the new team lead for animal behavior studies, recently arrived from Colorado, chosen as much for her fearlessness as for her PhD. Still, she felt like an outsider, an Indian-American woman in a field dominated by older white men, responsible for a dozen interns and 1 million data points, but always judged a little more harshly. Tonight, she just wanted silence, a few solid observations for her research, and the peace that came from watching wild things in their own world. She had planned to monitor a small herd of Mustangs that grazed the northern valley, a rare group with an unusually protective mare, a dappled gray called Willow. The rumor among rangers was that Willow had survived 3 winters alone after losing her foal to a mountain lion, becoming something of a legend. Mira hoped to capture evidence of her leadership, perhaps a rare photo for the upcoming report. Instead, what she saw stopped her cold. Half hidden in the long grass, Willow stood with her head bowed over something that writhed and whimpered. Mira steadied her camera, heart thudding. Then she realized there was more than one creature beneath Willow's protective stance. 3 tiny shapes, their coats dark and speckled with pale markings. Not foals, not even horse-like, but unmistakable wolf pups. Mira sucked in her breath, almost dropping her camera. She'd read about interspecies bonds, sure, but never in the wild, and never between a prey animal and its predator. She froze, adrenaline pounding. Was she really seeing this? The mare was sheltering the pups, nudging them with her nose, the way a mother would guide her own young. One pup, trembling, pressed its muzzle against Willow's flank. Another gave a high, plaintive cry, and Willow lowered her body, almost lying down, so the pups could huddle close against her warmth. A distant howl floated across the valley, the pups startled, one scrambling to hide beneath Willow's belly. Mira looked around, expecting to see the rest of the wolf pack in the shadows. Nothing. Her mind raced. 3 pups, no adult wolves in sight. Orphans, she realized, abandoned or separated, now adopted by a horse whose own foal had been lost. Mira's training told her to alert her supervisors immediately. Intervene. This was breaking every rule. Human presence was supposed to remain neutral, hands off, never disrupt natural processes. Yet the scientist in her was electrified. Her hands shook as she focused the camera, desperate to record everything. Willow's gentle movements, the pup's trust, the strange hush that had settled over the meadow. She whispered to herself, voice barely audible, "This can't be real." But it was. Every instinct screamed at her to stay hidden. She shifted her position behind a fallen log, careful not to rustle the leaves, hardly daring to breathe. She snapped a dozen photos, then set her camera down, afraid even the shutter might alert the animals. Her brain buzzed with the implications. If she called the park office, this would become a media circus, a scientific anomaly, dissected by men in suits and boots, probably resulting in the removal or tranquilizing of both horse and pups. Her fingers hovered over her phone. She pictured her supervisor's voice, strict and doubting. "Dr. Patel, you say you witnessed what?" She closed her eyes, weighing her options. One choice meant following the rules, preserving her spotless record, but dooming the fragile bond she'd just witnessed. The other meant secrecy, risking her career, but letting nature unfold a miracle. A twig snapped behind her. She whipped around, pulse roaring, but it was only a deer moving through the brush. She let out a shaky breath. When she turned back, Willow was licking one of the pups, who yawned and tumbled against her front legs. The other two nestled close, sleepy but safe. Mira made her decision. She set up her camera on a tripod, using the long lens to minimize disturbance. She scribbled quick notes in her field journal, fingers cramped but determined. She'd document everything, every gesture, every sound, as quietly and unobtrusively as possible. The moon rose higher, casting a silver glow on Willow and her unlikely brood. For a moment, it felt like the world was holding its breath, suspended in awe and possibility. Somewhere deep in Mira's chest, a wall she'd built, of logic, of rules, of self-protection, cracked a little. Maybe, she thought, the world didn't need saving so much as witnessing. She crouched lower, eyes stinging as Willow raised her head, meeting Mira's gaze across the dark. The Mustang's eyes were deep and unafraid, almost knowing. "Okay," Mira whispered, voice trembling. "I'll keep your secret." And so, with the moon and mountains as her only witnesses, Mira Patel broke the rules, choosing to trust in wildness, wonder, and the quiet miracle blooming before her eyes. Days blurred together after that first midnight encounter, as Dr. Mira Patel's world shrank to a circle of grass, trees, and the wild drama unfolding just beyond her reach. Each morning, she slipped out of camp before sunrise, skirting the main ranger trails, cutting through fog and dew-wet brush, always careful not to leave footprints where someone curious might follow. She worked alone, heart pounding with anticipation, every sense tuned to the meadow's secret. No one, not her colleagues, not her interns, suspected the miracle she was quietly recording. Mira's camera became an extension of herself. From the cover of her makeshift blind, a tangle of fallen limbs and old camouflage netting, she documented everything. Willow guiding the wolf pups to shelter at the base of a pine, teaching them how to drink from the creek, even warning them with a soft nicker when a hawk passed overhead. The pups, in turn, seemed to accept Willow as their mother, crawling beneath her legs when frightened, following her lead as she grazed, licking her face and sometimes curling up on her outstretched legs to sleep. Each moment felt impossible. Mira filled pages of her journal, describing the way Willow groomed the pups, the gentle discipline she used when one strayed too far, the curious affection that passed between them, a silent, instinctive language that transcended species. She even named the pups in her notes. Luna, for the boldest female with a white crescent on her chest. Ash, the runt, all legs and oversized ears. And Scout, always wandering off, always finding his way back to the mare's side. But the secret grew heavier by the day. Every time Mira closed her journal, guilt gnawed at her. She was breaking protocol, hiding evidence from the park's board, risking her reputation and maybe even her job. Still, the thought of outsiders descending on the valley, darting, capturing, studying Willow and the pups like lab specimens, made her sick to her stomach. She remembered how her own father, a botanist, had once lost his work to bureaucratic interference. She'd sworn never to let that happen to anything or anyone she loved. Sleep came in fitful snatches. Sometimes, lying awake in her tiny tent, Mira replayed the day's scenes in her mind, her heart twisting with worry. Should she come clean? Was she protecting the animals or just protecting herself from fallout? What if the Mustangs or wolves suffered because of her choice? Each question hung over her, heavy as the Montana sky. One evening, after nearly a week of observation, a new tension crept into the air. The wind carried the scent of strangers, cigarette smoke, engine oil, the sharp tang of aftershave. Mira's skin prickled as she hiked back toward her blind, boots crunching in the twilight. She ducked low, heart hammering, and froze at the sight of a shadow moving at the edge of the trees. "Thought I'd find you here," a voice called softly. Mira spun around. It was Dr. Alan Reeves, her senior colleague known for his big reputation and even bigger ego. He stood with his arms folded, face half hidden by a wide-brimmed hat, lips curled in a smirk. He must have followed her, probably more than once. Mira's mind raced. Had he seen the wolves and Willow? Had he guessed her secret? Alan took a step closer, his eyes glinting in the dusk. "You've been logging a lot of solo hours out here, Patel. Care to share what you found?" He drew out the last word, his tone mocking. "Or do you want me to check your field notes myself?" Mira's jaw tightened. She tried to steady her voice. "I'm working on a behavior anomaly. Nothing concrete yet." He snorted. "Nothing concrete? Your interns say you're always disappearing. The board's getting antsy about your lack of updates." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "You're not the first one to try hiding something out here, but you might be the first to get away with it if you're smart. So, what's your play?" Mira's stomach twisted. Alan had a reputation for scooping credit, twisting stories to fit his narrative. If he got involved, Willow and the pups would become his discovery, fodder for his next grant, his next headline. Worse, he'd bring a team, scare the animals, maybe separate them in the name of science. She took a slow breath, weighing her words. "I need more time. The situation is delicate. If the board finds out, or if you go blabbing, you'll ruin everything." Alan smiled, cold and triumphant. "Or, you let me help. I'll handle the reporting. You get your name on the paper? I get the press. No one else needs to know." Her heart pounded with anger and fear. She thought of Willow, the pups, the fragile trust she'd seen build day by day. She saw her father's disappointment, remembered her own vow. "Enough." "No," Mira said, her voice clear and unwavering. "This isn't about headlines. It's about protecting something rare. If you interfere, you'll destroy it, and I won't let that happen." Alan's eyes narrowed, a muscle ticking in his jaw. "Be careful, Patel. You're playing with your career." "Maybe so," she said, stepping between him and the direction of the meadow. "But at least I'm not playing with their lives." He stared her down, then spat into the grass and stormed off, muttering about insubordination and consequences. Mira slumped against a tree, adrenaline draining from her limbs. The sun was gone. The meadow dipped in shadow, but Willow and the pups were still out there, oblivious to the war raging at the edge of their world. Mira pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her own wild heartbeat. She didn't know what would come next. She only knew she'd made her choice, and for the first time in days, she felt a strange, stubborn sense of peace. Some secrets, she thought, are worth keeping. Some battles, even against the odds, are worth the risk. The days that followed took on a gentler rhythm, as if nature itself had pressed pause after the storm of conflict with Alan Reeves. For Dr. Mira Patel, the meadow became more than a research site. It felt like a sanctuary, a sacred space untouched by the noise and competition of the outside world. As June arrived, The landscape turned lush and alive. Wild lupines painted the valley blue, and songbirds flitted through branches heavy with dew. It was here, in this hidden cradle, that Mira watched the extraordinary family of Willow and the wolf pups quietly flourish. Mira rose with the dawn every day, careful to leave no sign of her presence. She built a more sophisticated blind, weaving it from pine boughs and camouflage netting, anchoring it deep in a thicket at the meadow's edge. She became a ghost, silent, patient, nearly invisible, her only companions a notebook and her camera's long lens. From her hiding spot, she watched Willow graze while the wolf pups wrestled and tumbled through the grass, their playful yips and yowls blending with the distant calls of the herd. She filled page after page with notes. The pups, she realized, had adopted Willow's routines, waking when she rose, nuzzling her side for comfort, watching the herd's older mares for cues on when to move or freeze. Willow, for her part, seemed transformed by the role of surrogate mother. Her body, lean from years alone, took on new strength and purpose. She nudged the pups away from poisonous plants, kicked up dust to teach them to avoid rattlesnakes, and pressed them close when thunder rumbled across the peaks. In the long, quiet hours, Mira's thoughts often drifted to her own childhood. She remembered how her father, gentle and curious, had taught her to see every living thing as worthy of respect. After his death, grief had swallowed her for years, leaving her adrift in her studies and restless in her work. But now, watching Willow heal through love and the pups thrive despite their loss, Mira felt something inside her begin to mend. She scribbled confessions in her journal, admitting, for the first time, that her pursuit of science had always been tangled up with a desperate need to belong, to find family where she could. One day, a storm rolled through the park, sending sheets of rain across the meadow. Mira huddled in her blind, shivering, but kept her camera steady as Willow shielded the pups beneath her body. Lightning split the sky, and the Mustang herd bunched together, anxious, their coats slick with water. But Willow never flinched. When the worst had passed, she led the pups to a shallow dip in the ground where the herd often rested, her head high and proud. Mira marveled at how the pups learned from Willow, even as their instincts tugged them in another direction. She watched Luna, the boldest stalk grasshoppers through the wildflowers. Ash, the runt, liked to hide beneath Willow's tail, peeking out with wide, cautious eyes. Scout was forever exploring, vanishing into the reeds and reappearing at Willow's side just before Mira's heart could leap into panic. It was not lost on her that Willow's patience with them mirrored her own father's quiet encouragement years ago. She chronicled every interaction, but not all her notes were scientific. Late at night, Mira would reread her journal, her handwriting shaky. "Grief doesn't disappear," she wrote once, watching Willow settle with the pups after sunset. "But it can soften, become something gentler, a reminder that love doesn't end, it changes shape." As June melted into July, Mira began to notice subtle shifts in the dynamics of the herd. The older mares, who had once eyed the wolf pups with suspicion, now tolerated their presence. The herd would graze in loose formation around Willow and her charges, occasionally allowing a pup to sneak close and sniff at a hoof or a swishing tail. Mira saw Ash get nudged by an elder Mustang once, more playfully than threatening. This quiet acceptance felt like a small miracle. She noted the way the pups learned to move quietly among the horses, avoiding sudden lunges or aggressive play, adapting in ways that only wild creatures can. Mira's own healing deepened with every day spent in this unlikely community. she found herself smiling more, the ache in her chest slowly giving way to a sense of gratitude. She sometimes talked softly to herself, or to her father's memory, describing what she saw as if he were there beside her. "You'd love this, Dad," she whispered one morning as Willow nuzzled Scout after a rough tumble. "You always said life surprises us most when we think we understand it." Yet even in this gentle routine, Mira knew the peace was fragile. She kept watch for signs of trouble, tracks from coyotes or the distant howl of other wolves, reminders that nature's balance could shift in an instant. She forced herself to remain an observer, resisting the urge to intervene, believing, hoping, that Willow's instincts would guide her and the pups safely through. One evening, as the sun dropped behind the mountains, Mira packed her gear in silence. Willow and the pups lay curled together beneath a spreading pine, the light turning their coats to gold. Mira hesitated, then took a final photograph, not for her research, but for herself. She wanted to remember this moment of peace, this fragile family, and the way it made her believe in healing again. As she walked back to camp, the sky alive with stars, Mira realized she no longer felt quite so alone. In the wild, among strangers bound by love and need, she'd found a lesson her father had tried to teach her long ago. That belonging is not about blood, but about choosing, every day, to care for something beyond yourself. As summer settled in, the days in Glacier National Park grew longer, and the odd family Mira watched began to move with a quiet confidence across the high meadows. Willow and her wolf pups were no longer outcasts on the edge of the herd. Something remarkable was happening. The Mustangs were adapting, learning to accept these little predators in their midst, guided by Willow's calm presence and the natural law of survival that always favors the bold. Mira found herself mesmerized by the subtle shifts in herd dynamics. The lead stallion, a big sorrel named Jasper, had first kept a wary eye on the pups, but over the weeks, his vigilance turned to tolerance. Mira jotted in her journal how the herd allowed the pups to drink at the waterhole alongside them, how no adult Mustang flinched when Luna or Ash darted too close to their hooves. Once, Mira even caught Scout gently butting heads with a yearling colt, both animals testing boundaries, but neither showing real aggression. It was a strange kind of peace, a truce that seemed to hold only because Willow made it so. The pups thrived, growing bolder and more coordinated, their play now tinged with wolfish instinct, stalking, chasing, tumbling in the long grass, but always returning to the safety of Willow's side. Mira marveled at the trust growing between them, a living lesson in empathy that crossed the usual lines of prey and predator. Still, the wild had its own rules. Mira watched for hours as Willow taught the pups how to listen to the wind and read the movements of the herd. She saw the wolf pups learn to freeze when danger was near, to mimic the horse's stillness when a shadow passed overhead. The Mustangs, in turn, seemed to grow more at ease with their unlikely companions. Mira wondered if loss, the kind that Willow had survived and the pups had been born into, could make space for new bonds no textbook could ever explain. Outside the meadows, rumors of unusual animal patterns began to ripple through the park's research teams. One morning in the ranger station, Mira overheard a junior scientist talking about wolves behaving weird and horses acting almost tame. Mira kept her head down, giving nothing away. She was careful with her field reports, leaving out the more incredible details, but she couldn't help feeling the net tightening. That's when Maria entered her story. A park ranger with a warm laugh and sharp eyes, known for her integrity and her fondness for bending the rules, when it meant doing right by the animals. Maria had grown up in a ranching family outside Missoula, but she'd traded horses for hiking boots after college, drawn to the freedom and responsibility of public lands. Mira met her one afternoon while checking camera traps on the edge of the valley. At first, she worried Maria had come to check on her, but instead, the ranger offered a thermos of coffee and an easy smile. "Long days out here," Maria said, settling onto a log beside Mira. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Mira hesitated. For weeks, she'd kept the secret to herself, terrified that telling anyone, even a friend, would doom Willow and the pups. But there was something honest in Maria's gaze, a patience that reminded Mira of her own father. Eventually, over the course of several quiet lunches, Mira let the story slip, haltingly at first, then in a rush, showing Maria photos and pages from her journal. To Mira's relief, Maria didn't call her crazy. Instead, she listened, eyes wide with wonder, shaking her head in disbelief. "You're sitting on a miracle," Maria said at last. "But miracles don't last long around bureaucrats. You need a partner if you're going to keep this going." From that day, Maria became Mira's silent ally. She helped cover Mira's absences, offered tips for erasing tracks and hiding camera equipment, and, perhaps most importantly, listened on nights when the burden of secrecy felt too heavy. Together, they kept the secret, even as whispers spread through the research community. Maria's humor and resilience gave Mira strength. When doubts crept in, Maria reminded her, "Sometimes, the best thing you can do for the wild is get out of its way." Mira also found a new kind of courage through quiet messages home to her mother in Colorado. She wrote coded emails, leaving out the specifics but sharing her awe and fear. Her mother responded with wisdom honed by years of immigrant resilience. "Trust your instincts, Mira. Sometimes love is the bravest science." Still, each day felt more precarious. Rangers talked of mounting more surveys. The park director wanted an explanation for odd predator-prey interactions. Mira and Maria worked double shifts, removing any traces of their observation sites, rotating camera traps, always watching for the moment someone might stumble upon Willow's fragile family. And yet, in the meadow, peace endured. Mira watched as Willow led the pups into the creek to play, splashing and barking in the shallows, watched the herd nuzzle them, watched the wolf pups curl up around Willow's legs at nightfall. Sometimes Mira wept quietly at the beauty of it all, how love, in its wildest forms, could bridge the impossible. She wrote in her journal, "This is what my father meant when he talked about seeing with the heart, not just the eyes." Sometimes the wild shows us who we could be, if only we dared. For now, Willow, the pups, the herd, and their two human allies remained safe, held in a delicate balance that only the wild and the deepest empathy could sustain. By mid-July, the quiet of the meadow had begun to fray at the edges. The peace Mira and Maria had worked so hard to protect was threatened by more than just the curiosity of scientists. The wilderness was always watching, and now, so were strangers with motives far less pure. It started with new tire tracks on the fire road, a set of deep ruts winding dangerously close to the hidden valley. Mira noticed them one morning on her way to check camera traps. At first, she thought they might be from park maintenance crews, but something felt off. There was an unfamiliar emptiness to the air, as if the usual balance had shifted. She scanned the tree line, heart thumping, suddenly more alert than ever. Later that afternoon, Maria confirmed her fears. "I heard on the radio that some out-of-state researchers have pulled permits to study predator-prey interactions. Word is, they're planning to tag every Mustang and wolf they can find, Full collars, blood samples, the works. Mira's chest tightened. They can't. If they so much as spook Willow or the pups, everything we've protected will fall apart. Maria shook her head, jaw set. That's not all. There's talk of poachers, too. Somebody's been seen in town trying to move Mustang hair. Park's putting up extra patrols, but it's a big place. The two women fell into a silent pact. That night, under the cover of darkness and a sliver of moon, they moved like shadows through the valley, erasing every trace of the animal's presence. They swept away hoofprints with branches, disguised game trails with rocks and fallen limbs, even smeared the scent of the herd with crushed sage. It was delicate work. One wrong move, one broken twig, and the balance could be lost. For days, Mira and Maria worked in nervous tandem. Every snap of a branch made their hearts race. Once, Mira spotted a distant flashlight bobbing in the pines, voices drifting on the wind. "You sure you saw wolf tracks? Looks like horse country to me." She held her breath, waiting until the intruders faded away. But the threats kept coming. One evening, as a thunderstorm gathered to the west, Mira watched from her blind as Willow grazed near the creek, the wolf pups playing tag in the tall grass. Suddenly, a gray blur flashed through the meadow, a coyote, sleek and desperate, drawn by the scent of young flesh. Mira's muscles tensed, her instincts screaming at her to intervene, but she forced herself to watch. Willow's head snapped up, ears pricked. The pups froze, Ash whining in fear. The coyote lunged, teeth bared, aiming for Luna. In a single explosive motion, Willow reared, lashing out with her hooves. The coyote dodged, but not fast enough. Willow's kick caught its flank, sending it yelping into the brush. The wolf pups scrambled behind Willow, trembling, while the herd circled in tight formation. The danger was gone, but the damage was done. Mira trained her lens on Willow and saw a deep gash across the mare's shoulder, blood welling beneath her silver coat. For a moment, she couldn't move, her heart breaking with the realization that the wild was cruel and that her hands were tied by the very rules she'd sworn to uphold. Maria arrived an hour later, breathless and muddy from the rain. "Did you see?" She stopped short, seeing the look on Mira's face. "She's hurt," Mira whispered, voice cracking. "She saved them, but she's bleeding." Maria looked grim. "We could try to treat her. We have the kit in the truck, antiseptic, stitches. But if we get too close, we risk the whole herd spooking. The board would ask questions. Someone would notice." Mira's mind raced with images of Willow in pain, of the wolf pups left alone if their protector failed. Every instinct in her screamed to help. But she remembered her father's words. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for the wild is to get out of its way. "We watch," Mira said finally, swallowing the lump in her throat. "We trust her. We trust nature." So they waited. Through days of steady rain and nights thick with fear, Mira documented everything. Willow limped at first, favoring her injured shoulder. The wolf pups rarely left her side, pressing close, offering what comfort they could. The herd adjusted, moving at Willow's slower pace, grazing only where she could reach. Even Jasper, the usually aloof stallion, stood guard at night, keeping the valley clear of predators. Mira saw how pain and danger had deepened the bonds between them all. Horse and wolf, wild and wary, each member of the unlikely family adapting for the sake of the others. She wrote long entries in her journal, her handwriting shaky, describing Willow's fierce courage and the way the pups nuzzled her wounds, as if to heal her by sheer force of will. But the human threats never truly faded. The rival research team set up camp on the far ridge, their ATVs growling at dusk, their bright jackets flashing in the sun. Mira and Maria grew paranoid, sleeping in shifts, taking turns checking the blind and the herd's tracks. Rumors of poachers swirled in town. 2 Mustangs from another band vanished overnight, their bodies later found by rangers, manes hacked off for profit. Still, Willow endured. With time, her wound closed, a ragged scar left behind. The wolf pups grew bolder, venturing further from her side, but always circling back at dusk. Through it all, Mira clung to hope and faith in the wild's capacity for resilience. One morning, as the mist burned away and the meadow shimmered with dew, Mira watched Willow and the pups emerge from the trees, whole but forever changed. She felt a surge of gratitude and fear. Gratitude for the miracle of survival, fear that any day now, the fragile peace might shatter for good. Mira looked at Maria and whispered, "We can only hold off the world so long." Maria nodded, squeezing her arm. "Then let's make every day count." In the wild, the hardest lesson was always the same: to love fiercely, but let go when the time came. As the days grew hotter, Mira noticed a restless energy humming beneath the surface of the meadow. The wolf pups, now lanky and sharp-eyed, moved differently than before. Their games became rougher, their movements less clumsy and more purposeful. There was a hunger in them that even Willow's watchful presence couldn't soothe. One dawn, Mira huddled in her blind with her notebook and field glasses, fighting off sleep as she watched the wolf pups stalk grasshoppers in the tall grass. Luna, with her crescent-shaped chest mark, moved ahead of the others, crouching low and springing with a speed that surprised even Mira. Ash, ever the runt, watched his sister, copying her motions, while Scout zigzagged along the edges, his nose twitching at every new scent. Mira made notes, both excited and anxious. They were thriving, yes, but their wild instincts were rising to the surface. That afternoon, a disturbance rippled through the herd. Jasper, the stallion, snorted and stamped the earth as the younger Mustangs bunched together, their tails flicking. Mira focused her camera just in time to catch Luna breaking away from Willow's side, her body low and tense, eyes fixed on a rabbit that had ventured too far from the burrow. Mira's heart pounded. She'd seen the pups play hunt before, but this was different. Luna moved with a predator's purpose, silent and deadly. In a blur, she lunged at the rabbit. The herd startled, some rearing and kicking, as Luna dragged the squirming animal back toward Willow and her siblings. Willow let out a piercing whinny, rearing on her hind legs. The pups froze, ears flattened, the herd scattered, and Mira watched as Willow stepped between Luna and the other Mustangs, torn between protecting her herd and her adopted children. The tension in the meadow was palpable. Mira scribbled furiously in her journal. Conflict between nurture and nature. Willow's role as protector in question. Pup's instincts clashing with herd safety. She felt a pang of guilt, knowing that, despite all her hope and effort, she could not stop the wild from being wild. As dusk settled, the Mustangs regrouped at the far end of the meadow, keeping their distance from Willow and the pups. Mira watched as Willow nudged the dead rabbit away, her eyes filled with something like sorrow or confusion. The pups circled her, whining and unsure, sensing the shift in their relationship. That night, Mira struggled to sleep. The day's events played over and over in her mind. She thought of Willow, caught between two worlds, never quite at home in either. She thought of the pups, their need for belonging clashing with the undeniable pull of their blood. She thought of her own life, how she'd spent so long trying to fit into spaces that were never built for her, how she'd tried to nurture something wild inside herself. The next morning, as she checked her messages in the ranger cabin, Mira's anxiety turned to dread. A terse email from the local wildlife board pinged in her inbox. Unusual predator-prey interactions reported by field teams. Possible wolf-Mustang contact. Team dispatched to investigate and, if necessary, relocate animals for public safety. Please report all findings immediately. Her hands shook. If the board intervened, it could mean the end for Willow and the wolf pups, separation, captivity, perhaps even worse. She rushed to find Maria, who was already gearing up. "They know," Mira said, her voice tight. "They're sending a removal team." Maria swore softly under her breath. "We'll stall them as long as we can. You keep eyes on the herd. Document everything. If they try to separate the pups from Willow, we need proof of what this family really is." Mira nodded, her mind racing. She spent the next days glued to her blind, camera ready, field journal always open. She saw the Mustang's nervousness around the wolf pups intensify. The herd grazed farther away, and even Jasper kept a suspicious eye on the little predators. Willow grew more protective, positioning herself between the pups and the others, calling to them with soft nickers when they strayed too far. One afternoon, Mira witnessed Scout snap at a young foal who had wandered close. The foal squealed, bolting back to its mother, and the Mustang stampeded for the ridge. Mira's heart ached. The fragile peace was cracking. Willow looked between the two groups, her body tense, sides heaving. It was as if she was pleading with both, begging for understanding that could never truly exist. Mira wrote, "Limits of empathy. Even love cannot erase instinct. Watching nature's cruel math. Nurture versus nature." The lesson gnawed at her, both humbling and heartbreaking. Maria, meanwhile, did her best to mislead the removal team, guiding them on winding hikes through distant valleys, always just missing the herd. But with every passing day, the team grew more suspicious. Their radios crackled with coded chatter about capture protocols and potential reintroduction sites. One evening, as storm clouds boiled on the horizon, Mira sat in her blind, watching Willow nuzzle the pups, trying to comfort them as the herd kept its distance. A coyote howled in the far woods, answered by a deeper, wilder cry. A wolf pack's call, far away but unmistakable. The pups' ears pricked up. They whimpered and paced, looking toward the distant woods. For the first time, Mira saw fear and longing in their eyes, an ache for something she could not give them, not even through Willow's fierce love. That night, Mira wrote a single line in her journal, her tears blurring the ink. "The wild always calls us home, even as we fight to stay." The tension in Glacier National Park finally erupted one wind-lashed morning as the removal team thundered into the valley, trucks grinding up the ridge and radios crackling with urgency. Mira woke before dawn, the uneasy feeling in her stomach blooming into panic when she spotted the convoy of park vehicles snaking through the trees below. She scrambled to collect her field notes and camera, breath fogging in the crisp air, mind racing with a single thought. It was all about to unravel. Maria met her at the edge of the meadow, breathless, hair whipped by the wind. "They're here. Full team. Tranquilizers, nets, radio collars. They want us to lead them straight to Willow and the pups." Mira's fists clenched. "We can't let them do this. If they capture the pups, if they separate them from Willow, none of them will survive." Maria's eyes shone with the same mix of fear and determination. "Whatever happens, We don't give up their location without a fight. The team fanned out, their leader, a sharp-jawed official named Ranger Cole, marching toward Mira and Maria, clipboard in hand. We know you've been observing an unusual wolf-Mustang interaction, Dr. Patel. We're acting on direct orders to remove the pups for their safety, and the herds. Lead us there now. Mira squared her shoulders. I won't. This isn't just an interaction. It's a family. Willow is their protector. If you tear them apart, you'll destroy something none of us can ever recreate. Ranger Cole's jaw tightened. That's not your call. This is park policy. If you obstruct, then arrest me, Mira said, voice steady but trembling inside. But I'm not betraying them. The team exchanged glances, confusion rippling through the ranks. Mira saw Maria shift, subtly positioning herself between the officials and the line of trees where she knew Willow and the pups were likely hiding. It was a gamble, but they had no choice. Protect the family at any cost. Suddenly, from the far side of the meadow, a thunder of hooves erupted. Jasper the stallion led the herd at a gallop, Willow at his side, the 3 wolf pups darting between her legs. The removal team shouted, scrambling to intercept. Mira's heart leapt into her throat as she watched the wild, desperate escape. The herd scattered like smoke, but Willow circled back, urging the pups to stay close. The urgency in her posture unmistakable. In the chaos, one of the pups, Luna, tripped in the tall grass, yelping in pain. The team surged forward, nets raised, tranquilizer guns ready. Mira acted without thinking. She sprinted into the fray, arms wide, shouting, "No! Leave them alone!" The Mustangs shied away, but Willow stood her ground, nostrils flaring, eyes wild with fear. Maria was beside Mira in an instant, helping block the team's advance. "Let them go! You don't understand what you're destroying." Ranger Cole tried to shoulder past, but the herd's movement cut him off. In the confusion, 2 of the pups, Ash and Scout, managed to slip away, vanishing into the dense forest beyond the meadow. The Mustang herd running interference as the team tried to regroup. Luna, injured and limping, collapsed at Willow's feet. Willow circled her protectively, snorting and kicking at anyone who got too close. Mira and Maria retreated to Luna's side, throwing themselves between her and the team. Mira's voice shook as she pleaded, "She's hurt. Let us care for her. Give us that much." A strange hush fell over the scene. The removal team, frustrated and outmaneuvered, searched for the missing pups, but the herd's disruption had scattered the entire operation. Ranger Cole, face red with anger, barked into his radio, "We've lost visual on the targets. Fall back and regroup." Maria crouched beside Luna, gently examining her leg. "It's bad, but not hopeless. We need to move her. Willow won't leave her side." Mira's eyes met Willow's, a silent understanding passing between woman and mare. "We'll help," she whispered. Together, she and Maria lifted Luna as gently as they could, Willow following every step, her breath hot on Mira's back. The group slipped away from the chaos, circling through dense brush to a hidden glade Maria knew well. They worked quickly and quietly, using supplies from Maria's pack to clean and dress Luna's wound, all the while keeping a lookout for the return of the team. As dusk fell, Mira and Maria took turns comforting Luna, the pup's breaths shallow but determined. Willow never left her side, nuzzling her gently, nickering in distress when Luna whimpered. The silence in the glade was thick with unspoken fears. Would the removal team find them? Had Ash and Scout made it to safety? Would Luna survive the night? Meanwhile, the team scoured the valley, growing increasingly frustrated as darkness settled. With no sign of the missing pups and only vague tracks to follow, they retreated, their radios crackling with reports of uncooperative personnel and unpredictable herd activity. Mira and Maria huddled together in the fading light, exhaustion washing over them. Maria's voice was raw. "We bought them time, but this isn't over." Mira nodded, tears stinging her eyes. "All we can do is keep fighting. For Willow, for the pups, for the wild." The glade felt like a sanctuary, for now, but the weight of what they had sacrificed pressed in on both women. As the night deepened, Mira found herself whispering a silent promise to Luna and to Willow. "I will protect you, no matter what it costs." Somewhere, not far off, a pair of distant howls rose into the darkening sky. Ash and Scout, calling out to their lost family, or perhaps answering the wild's call at last. The chase was over, but the true test had only just begun. Night came thick and cold over the hidden glade, wrapping Mira, Maria, Willow, and Luna in its hush. The stars above seemed impossibly distant, and for the first time in weeks, the wild did not feel like a friend, but a vast, indifferent watcher. Mira sat with her back against an old pine, eyes gritty from exhaustion, her hand resting on Luna's side as the young wolf pup shivered through another wave of pain. Willow stood protectively over them both, her flank pressed close to Luna, a low rumble in her chest each time the pup whimpered. The wound was worse than they'd hoped. By the flickering light of Maria's flashlight, Mira could see the swelling around Luna's leg. The way the pup's breaths came in shallow, ragged bursts. They'd done all they could, cleaned the wound, splinted the limb, whispered encouragements that Luna likely didn't understand, but maybe felt in her bones. Still, the hope that had carried them this far was beginning to slip away, replaced by a heavy sorrow Mira couldn't shake. Maria crouched nearby, hands wrapped around a mug of cooling tea. "Sometimes there's only so much we can do, Mira. Even out here, love and luck can't fix everything." Mira nodded, fighting tears. "I know, but it's not fair. She fought so hard to stay with Willow." Willow seemed to sense their grief. She nudged Luna gently, then lay down so the pup could rest her head against the mare's chest. For long minutes, Mira and Maria said nothing, the silence broken only by the soft breathing of the animals and the occasional distant howl from the mountains. The sound seemed to tug at Luna, whose ears twitched even in her pain. Hours passed. The moon shifted. Maria dozed lightly, while Mira stayed awake, mind spinning through every memory. The first day she saw Willow take in the pups, the weeks of secret watching, the fragile alliances and impossible choices. She thought of her own father, lost too soon, and how she'd learned that grief and love were tangled like the roots of an old tree. One could not exist without the other. Near dawn, Luna's breathing grew shallow. Her body trembled and stilled, her bright eyes finding Mira's for a long, silent moment. Willow nickered softly, lowering her head, and for the briefest instant, Mira felt that the boundaries between species, between wild and human, horse and wolf, didn't matter at all. There was only love, fierce and honest, in that circle of loss. When Luna slipped away, Willow remained by her side, refusing to move. The air felt sacred, and Mira wept quietly, her tears soaking the grass. Maria joined her, and together they sat with Willow until the first golden rays crept over the ridgeline. Finally, gently, they coaxed Willow to her feet. The mare nudged Luna's still form once more before turning away, her eyes reflecting something deep and ancient, a sorrow the wild had known forever. They buried Luna beneath the pine, just out of sight of the glade. marking the spot with a ring of river stones. Maria said a few words about life and wildness, her voice hoarse, while Mira pressed her palm to the earth, whispering a promise to remember. Willow stood apart, watching, her head high and unbroken. Afterward, the glade felt changed. The world was quieter, but not empty. Willow, though grieving, seemed to understand. She lingered by Luna's grave for a long time, then returned to the creek where the herd sometimes grazed. Mira and Maria followed at a respectful distance, giving the mare space but unwilling to let her go completely. The remaining two wolf pups, Ash and Scout, were seen at a distance that evening. They had not returned to the glade but hovered on the edge of the forest, howling, first softly, then with growing strength, toward the distant mountains. Their voices carried a new note, raw and wild, and Mira felt a pang that was both sadness and hope. "They're answering the call," Maria said quietly. "The one they were born to follow." Mira nodded. "We can't hold them here forever. Willow taught them love, but the wild will teach them the rest." As days passed, Ash and Scout came less frequently to the meadow. Mira watched them from afar, noting how they kept to the shadows, their bodies growing stronger, their movements more sure. Sometimes Willow would look up, ears pricked, as if listening for Luna's spirit or the echo of the pups' voices, but she did not search for them. In her loss, there was a strange grace, a knowledge that letting go was the last gift she could give. For Mira, the pain of losing Luna and seeing the other pups drift away mingled with gratitude for what she had witnessed. She understood, finally, that loving something wild meant accepting that you could not always keep it close. The ache was proof that the bond had mattered. On a quiet evening, Mira and Maria stood together at the edge of the valley, the sky awash with the colors of sunset. The Mustang herd grazed nearby, Willow at the center, her silver coat gleaming. A distant wolf pack howled in the far hills, and Mira felt a gentle ache in her chest, but also a peace she hadn't known before. "We did right by them," Maria said, voice steady. Mira smiled softly, the lines of sorrow and joy mingling in her face. And they did right by each other. The wild was still wild, but in the space they'd carved, through loss and letting go, a deeper love had taken root. The rest of the summer drifted by in Glacier National Park, with a quiet steadiness, the heartbreak of Luna's loss slowly giving way to a quieter gratitude. For Mira, each day now felt both lighter and heavier. Lighter for the burden she'd set down, heavier for the wisdom she'd gathered in its place. The wild had not given her what she thought she wanted, but something deeper and far more lasting. After the ceremony for Luna, Willow rejoined the Mustang herd. Mira watched from a respectful distance as the silver mare returned to her old rhythms, grazing and resting among her own kind. The herd, forever changed by the presence of the wolf pups, seemed to have learned a new, cautious tolerance. They made room for Willow's solitary habits, and sometimes, on quiet afternoons, for Mira herself, who would set up her blind at the edge of the valley, content just to watch. Mira filled the pages of her journal with final observations. The subtle ways Willow's leadership had shifted the herd's dynamics, the resilience of Ash and Scout as they transitioned fully to the life of wild wolves, the subtle traces of empathy and memory that lingered in every gesture. She wrote, "This family changed me. I used to think science was about control, about capturing the wild and forcing it into patterns we could understand. But the greatest lessons are about trust, letting go, and having the faith to let things become what they're meant to be." Word of the strange Mustang wolf phenomenon spread quietly through the scientific community. Mira knew the story was too powerful to hide forever, and she chose to share it on her own terms. With Maria's encouragement and help, Mira compiled her field notes, photographs, and sketches into a research paper, a careful, respectful documentation of what she'd seen. She wrote about the day Willow first accepted the pups, the seasons of risk and heartbreak, the ultimate act of letting go. She left out specific GPS coordinates and exact dates, knowing too well the damage that prying eyes and eager hands could do. Her manuscript caused a stir. Some in the academic world doubted the story outright, calling it an anomaly or unverified field myth. But others, scientists, writers, animal lovers, were moved and inspired. At the annual conference for wildlife behaviorists, Mira stood before a packed room, her heart in her throat, and told the story from start to finish. She didn't hide the pain or uncertainty. She spoke of the fragile trust that had allowed her to witness such a rare bond, the failures and griefs along the way, and the humility she'd learned in the face of nature's mysteries. For all our knowledge and tools, the wild does not belong to us, she said, her voice steady. Sometimes the best thing we can do is to watch, to respect, and to let the world reveal its own wisdom. The room was silent, then erupted in applause. Even her old colleague, Dr. Alan Reeves, approached her afterward, not with his usual swagger, but with a quiet respect. "I didn't believe you, not at first," he admitted, "but I see now why you kept it secret. Some things are too rare for interference." Her story spread beyond the walls of academia. Local papers picked it up. Park visitors asked about the silver mare and her wild friends. Mira found herself at the center of a debate about the boundaries of intervention and empathy in wildlife management. Some argued she should have done more, tagged, collared, intervened. Others praised her restraint. To Mira, the lesson was clear. Letting go is not a failure. Sometimes it is the most profound act of love. Through it all, Mira felt herself growing closer to her mother back in Colorado. Their conversations, once clipped and formal, deepened into real connection. Mira told her everything, the choices, the mistakes, the hope that had come from loss. Her mother listened and finally shared stories from her own past, about immigrating, starting over, and the quiet strength it took to trust the unknown. "You are braver than you know, Mira," she wrote in one letter. "The world is changed by those who care enough to do nothing sometimes." Mira took that to heart. She returned often to the valley where it had all begun, sometimes bringing visiting scientists or local schoolchildren. She would tell them the story, not just of a horse and her adopted wolf pups, but of the need for empathy and the power of patience. She spoke of how belonging can cross the lines of blood and species, how grief can turn into gratitude, and how every act of observation can be an act of reverence. The Mustang herd sometimes grazed near her camp, Willow at their center. The silver mare was older now, her steps slower but her eyes still sharp. Mira would sit quietly nearby, notebook in her lap, and let the wild come to her. Once, she saw Ash and Scout at the tree line, grown into lean, powerful wolves. They lingered for a moment, just watching, before melting back into the shadows. As summer turned to fall, Mira realized she had found her own kind of family in this place. Not by holding on too tightly, but by allowing herself, and all the creatures she loved, to become part of something bigger. The wild was not hers to own, but it was hers to honor. She wrote in her final journal entry, "To belong is to trust. To love is to let go." This is what the wild has taught me, and it is a lesson I will never forget. Years passed, but the wild story of Willow and the wolf pups echoed far beyond the grassy meadows of Glacier National Park. Time softened the pain of loss for Dr. Meera Patel, but it also sharpened her appreciation for what she had witnessed and what she had learned about the wild, about love, and about herself. Meera became something of a legend among wildlife researchers, her name attached to articles, lectures, and heated debates about ethics and empathy in field biology. She published not only scientific papers, but also essays and memoirs that spoke to wider audiences: hikers, teachers, children, and dreamers who longed for a glimpse of the magic she had lived. More and more, Meera found herself drawn away from the solitary work of data and observation and toward a calling she'd never expected: teaching, storytelling, and mentoring the next generation of conservationists. Every spring, she returned to Glacier National Park to lead nature tours for children from all backgrounds: urban kids who had never seen a mountain, local ranchers' children who knew the land but not its secrets, and young scientists hungry for adventure. On a sunlit June morning, Meera knelt in the wildflowers with a circle of wide-eyed kids. The air shimmered with birdsong and the distant whinny of mustangs grazing in the valley below. She told them the story of Willow, the silver mare who had taken in 3 orphaned wolf pups, defying every expectation, every boundary, and every so-called natural law. She spoke of courage and kindness, of the heartbreak of letting go, and the miracle of trust that had bridged the worlds of prey and predator. The children listened, rapt, as Meera described how Willow had defended the pups against coyotes, taught them to read the wind, and ultimately let them answer the wild call of their kind. She spoke of Luna's short, bright life and the bittersweet ceremony by the old pine. She spoke, too, of the days after, how Ash and Scout, once lost, became legends of their own, their howls still echoing in the forest, a testament to love's reach. After the story, the children peppered her with questions. Did Willow ever see the wolves again? Were you scared, Dr. Patel? Why did you have to let them go? Meera smiled and answered honestly. I don't know if Willow saw them again, but I like to believe she did. And yes, I was scared, every single day. But I learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to love without trying to control, to let go when the time comes, and to trust the wild to heal and carry on. Park policies, too, had changed as a result of Meera's work. Inspired by the story's resonance, Glacier National Park adopted more flexible research and management guidelines, ones that allowed for compassionate non-intervention and respected the natural formation of wild bonds. Rangers and researchers were encouraged to step back, to watch before acting, and to honor the possibility of miracles beyond their understanding. The story of Willow became required reading for new staff, a lesson in humility and wonder that carried as much weight as any technical manual. In the years that followed, Meera watched as her work inspired others. Young scientists wrote to her, confessing their doubts and their hopes. She read essays by high schoolers who wanted to become wildlife biologists, because Dr. Patel showed me that science is also about kindness. At conferences, seasoned researchers spoke more openly about compassion, patience, and the power of observation. Meera's relationship with her mother deepened, too. They visited the park together, walking the old trails and sitting in silence among the wildflowers. Her mother listened as Meera recounted each detail, from the first sighting of Willow and the pups to the painful day of letting go. Sometimes they wept together. Sometimes they laughed. Always, Meera felt her father's spirit in the wind and sun, as if he had been with her all along. One golden evening, As the shadows stretched across the valley and the herd grazed near a cluster of aspens, Mira stood at the edge of the meadow with her journal. Children chased butterflies nearby. The old silver mare, Willow, lifted her head and met Mira's gaze across the grass, a look that spoke of memory, of loss, and of unbroken strength. Mira pressed a hand to her heart, feeling the pulse of something larger than herself. She wrote her final reflections in her journal. There are moments in the wild when the boundaries between species, between science and wonder, seem to vanish. In those moments, we remember that love, real, fearless love, has the power to change everything. We learn that healing comes not from holding on, but from letting go. And we discover that every act of kindness, every risk taken for the sake of another, ripples outward, leaving a legacy that endures in both wild and human hearts. As dusk fell, Mira gathered the children for one last story. She told them that true healing is not the absence of pain, but the courage to love again and again, even knowing loss will come. She told them that every wild heart is worth trusting, every goodbye is a beginning, and every act of empathy plants a seed for the future. When the children left, Mira lingered at the edge of the meadow, watching as Willow led her herd across the open land, proud, unbroken, forever changed. In that moment, Mira knew her life's work was not just about animals or research, but about connection, courage, and the humility to listen to what the wild was always trying to teach. The lesson was simple and endless: to love beyond boundaries, to accept loss as part of the cycle, and to trust that every act of kindness, however small, leaves its mark on the world. And as the stars blinked on, Mira felt at peace, her heart forever wild.